Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bosses in Action. This is episode number 105. We are here with Follow Up Boss and going to be doing a great webinar for you guys. And today's guest that we have is Brian Curtis, and he's going to be walking us through the power of Neuro Linguistic Programming, which is also known as NLP for those that are unfamiliar with the long term of that. But Brian is here. He's going to walk us through what this looks like and how this is going to enhance your guys' relationships and also impact both professional and personal settings as well. So I'm going to hand it off over to Brian, and feel free to anybody that's on the webinar ask any questions within the chat. We will get those answered for you. And let's have Brian kick it away.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. Brian Curtis, happy to be here today. Really appreciate the intro and excited to cover this topic today. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second, but let me just tell you a little bit about who I am. I've been a Follow Up Boss customer since 2014. I used the original version of Follow Up Boss, those of you remember Follow Up Boss 1. And been associated with lab code agents and Follow Up Boss and a lot of those different things. I'm also a national real estate coach and do that. That's really my love and my passion. So with that in mind, I'm going to try and cover a whole bunch of information in a very short period of time. So I hope that I don't talk too fast. And I know this will be recorded, so you can slow it down if I talk too fast. But I want to make sure that I get as much of this content in as we can today. So like Trenton mentioned, we're going to talk about neuro-linguistic programming, and more than that, we're going to talk about how to work on your communication skills and how to be a better communicator. So it's really important to me. I think that's the ultimate thing that we do as salespeople, as real estate agents, as people, is communication. So I'm going to jump right into that and just start sharing my screen. And like Trenton said, if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to pay attention to those and get those answered. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure that that's working. Perfect. Okay. So I teach a class called Communicating for Real. And so this is a really shortened up version of one of those classes because the classes run an hour and a half. And so I'm going to compress some of that information down into about 30 minutes. So I want to start with this. What is our job? As real estate agents, I think sometimes we look at our job as we write contracts, we talk to clients, we show houses, we list houses. And I think those are definitely a function of what we're going to do as real estate agents. And I want to say more importantly, though, this is what I want to challenge everybody with today is, for me, the ultimate thing is not to be a great writer of contracts. I'm a good writer of contracts. It's not to be the best at showing houses or the best at listing houses, but it's about being the best communicator. And if my goal and my function is to be a high quality professional communicator, I feel like everything else falls away and everything else becomes easier. So that is literally my function when I'm working inside of real estate, when I'm working as a coach, when I'm doing any of that, is how can I be a communicator that people want to talk to, that people trust, that people like? And that's what I'm going to show you guys today. And hopefully it'll be something that you guys can go immediately take into your business. Okay, so what's my objective? So my objective today is just talk about a different way of communicating. I want to talk about a better way to listen, because at the end of the day, I think all too often we focus on what we're going to say, and that's definitely half of the equation, but also what about what we're taking in? What are we listening to? Because from my purview, arguably that's more important, because I see people answer the wrong question correctly all the time. Here's what I mean by that. They heard question A, they answer question B. They answer question B correctly, and the client is confused. The client most of the time doesn't say anything. They just go, okay, and move on. So understanding how to listen, to me, is a vital part of communication. I want to talk about this, and this is the majority of what we're going to spend the time, is how do I connect better with people? How do I get people to know, like, and trust me? Anyone who's been around real estate for any period of time has heard that for me to be successful as a salesperson, for me to be successful as a real estate agent, I have to get people to know, like, and trust me. And that's going to be the majority of our focus today. And then I want you to start, as you're working through this, paying attention to how you're communicating. So, in my world, one of the things that I see over and over again is I like to make this analogy. It's an analogy it's a sports analogy. So, I'm a big sports guy. NFL playoffs are going on right now. The college playoffs just happened. But what I want you to think about is this is how I see most real estate agents show up for their job. The equivalent of running onto the field with their civilian clothes on for the coin toss and going, I am ready. And they're not. And so I'm going to suggest that if we want to be more successful, we don't have to always learn better scripts. We don't have to make more phone calls, although those things do help. What we need to do is do better with the people we're already communicating with and find a way to help them get their goals. And if we create those win-win situations, then we'll be successful as well. Okay. So I want to start with just talking about what the purpose of language is. And the majority of people, if you ask them the purpose of language, they'll say to describe things. And that is definitely one of the things that's valuable about language. I can talk about the webinar I'm on today. I can talk about the group of people I'm talking to. It'll describe, it gives us information or content. And that's an important part of language. And at the same point in time, I'm going to argue that it's not the most important thing. So, what else can we do with language? Well, we can get people to do things. I think that's really important. And what I want to say, though, ultimately, is language is a tool for creation. And here's what I mean by that: our words, our thoughts actually become things. And I know that might sound a little bit weird, and I'm not going to go into the metaphysics or the quantum physics of all that. But what I do want to say is that the most important thing that we do with our words is we create. And we create in a lot of different ways. And so I'll cover some of those today, and I hope that'll make sense for you guys. So, underneath that creation, it's what we think about, what we talk about, what we dream about. I want to say this too, in case you haven't thought about it from this perspective: the person that you have the absolute most conversations with, and I don't even know who's watching this right now, but I want to say the person you have the most communication with, the most conversations with, is yourself. So self-talk is also very important. At the bottom of my slide here, I put this here, and this is something that comes from Tony Robbins. And I can remember when I learned this sitting in a room in San Jose, California in 2012 at a big Tony Robbins conference. There was about 10,000 people there. And Tony said, thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions, lead to results. And so this is why language is so important to me, because I believe Tony's right. I believe the things that we think cause us to have feelings about those things. And our feelings are why we act. If we're in a good mood, we do this. If we're in a bad mood, we do this. If we feel great about something, we're going to do this. If I'm comfortable with something, I'm going to do this. So your feelings drive so many of your actions. And obviously, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get better results. So one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today is how do I prepare so that when I'm going into a presentation, when I'm making a phone call, when I'm showing a house, that I'm having the right thoughts that give me the right feelings so I can get the right actions and get the right results. Okay. So normally if I was teaching this class, then I would actually show this video. This video is about 5 minutes long. I'm going to do a quick synopsis of it. If you want to see something fun, watch this video. And, I'm a pretty nerdy guy. I like psychology and I like tech and I like all of that stuff, but this is worth your time. So I'm going to do a quick synopsis of it just so you can hopefully have an understanding of what this is about. So this is a guy named Darren Brown. Darren Brown is a hypnotist. He's an NLP master. He is also a magician, a fun guy. He's got multiple television shows that you can watch. He's English, and he also has a couple of really cool things that are on Netflix. That if you want to get a little bit freaked out, go watch them. They're really cool. But this video specifically is about rapport, and I'm going to teach you the process that Darren uses for rapport to put two individuals in rapport. And here's what's really cool about this: he spends, it's hard to tell because there's some time lapse there, but let's say he spends about 5 to 10 minutes helping these two individuals get into rapport. And then the most interesting thing in my mind that happens is the one guy basically reads the other guy's mind. And I want to say that some people are going, yeah, that's not true. It's not right. But when I talk about how we actually communicate, I think it'll make a little bit of sense. And it actually shows how important our thoughts are when we're with other people. So again, please watch this video. It's fun. It's like 5 to 7 minutes long, and it's a really cool video. And Darren's a really neat guy. Okay, so with that in mind, I want you guys to keep in your mind the concept that, excuse me, that I can actually communicate more than just with the words I say. So And I also want to show you a little bit how the brain works and how it actually can create feelings. Again, thoughts lead to feelings, lead to actions, lead to results. So, those of you watching this right now, what I would like you to do, if you play along with me, is I'd like you to imagine that you're holding a lemon in your hand. And you can look at that lemon, it's a lemon. My guess is, I'm not with any of you, but none of you got really excited. None of you said, boy, I'm going to go get me a lemon. None of those things happened. You looked at it and say, okay, Brian, this is a strange thing. You're asking me to look at a lemon. I am. But now I want you to do this, because what I want you to see is how the brain actually processes information, and take a look at it. So instead of just holding a lemon in your hand, what I want you to do, and just play along with me. You can close your eyes if you want to get into some pretty good deep visualization, but I want you to hold that lemon in your hand. And then I want you to feel the skin, the wax of that skin, maybe the bumps of that skin. Maybe run it in front of your nose, get a little bit of that smell, that lemon fresh smell that we're all very familiar with. Now, what I want you to do is to imagine that you're in your kitchen and you're at your counter, you put out a plate or a cutting board, and you go grab a knife and you slice into that, and that just a little bit of the juice kind of squirts on you, get a little bit on your tongue. So when I do this, and I hope that you played along with that, I hope you took that 30 seconds to actually go through that visualization with me. The majority of people, I want to say somewhere between 90%, 85, 90% of the people will actually start having an experience of having their mouth water. They'll actually start to have an experience as if it was real. The reason that is your unconscious mind, and we'll talk a little bit more about the unconscious mind today. Your unconscious mind does not know the difference between something that you've actually experienced and something you've highly visualized. So if you close your eyes and go through that process of cutting that lemon and feeling it and almost hitting it, my guess is your mouth will water because your brain doesn't know the difference. And that's an important concept. And it really has a lot to do with communication, and I'll show you why. Okay. So I put this slide up there. It's a little bit of a mess, and that's kind of how the human brain is. It's a little bit of a mess. So what I want to say is ultimately, this is how we process information, and it's an important concept because if how we process information is how we're going to react in the world, and if we understand that better, then we can control that. So over on the left-hand side, you'll see the term internal representation. What does an internal representation mean? An internal representation is very simply the pictures inside of your brain. So your brain thinks in pictures, and a lot of people don't quite understand that, but here's a great way to illustrate that. Because since it thinks in pictures, it does not directly process negative. So what does that mean? Well, that means for me to think of something in a negative way, I have to think of it first. So watch this. If you guys are playing along, again, close your eyes, and I want you to not think of a blue tree. So to not think of a blue tree, you had to think of a blue tree first. And I know that's like, okay, what does that have to do with anything? But what I'm telling you is that is how our internal mind processes information. So it brings in information through our five senses, and then we process it in pictures in our unconscious mind. And here's one of the things that's most important about that. And this is something that most people don't quite get, but the majority of the information that we're bringing in, we're completely missing. As a matter of fact, on a conscious level, we process less than 1% of the information that we intake into our human brain on a daily basis. And any given second, we are only processing 126 bits of information consciously. In comparison, it's 2 million bits unconsciously. Okay, so I'm telling you all these things, but how does that help me? Why do I need this? How is this going to help me be a better real estate agent, make more sales, be a better leader? Well, I'm going to cover just a little bit of history, and then I'll show you the process that has been proven that will actually help you get in rapport with people at a high level, which allows you to be influential, which allows you to have more sales. Okay, so there's some history behind this. I'm going to skip some of this and get down to what I consider to be the important part. So you can read that. It's gee whiz kind of fun stuff. If you want to look up hypnotic messaging in the 50s, it's kind of a fun thing. But I want you to pay attention to the bottom 2 points, and that is that the conscious mind follows patterns, and the subconscious mind or unconscious mind, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, looks for what's different. So, in other words, the conscious mind gets stuck. It just kind of does its thing. The unconscious mind is picking up these things that are different. So, They did a study on what I'm going to teach you today, and the was done by a guy named Wood, and the studies from 2006. You can Google it, NLP study, NLP report study 2006, and you can find the paper on Wood. It's very scientific, so I didn't spend a bunch of time doing that, but I want to show you two quotes from that. The first one is that the findings from the second study, they did three, indicate that a descriptive nonverbal cues developed in the study influence the trustworthiness assessments of the receivers or the customers. What does that mean? That means the stuff that I'm going to teach you today, if you choose to use it, it will make your client trust you. And I don't know how to say that in a better way than that, so I'm going to be very blunt. The second one, during the instance of a meeting, the customer receiver is perceiving and interpreting. I'm going to skip that. Not only are the nonverbal signals of the salespeople important to developing rapport, but also these nonverbal signals are sought out. They're perceived and used by their customers in the assessment of trustworthiness. So, like I mentioned before, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And I'm going to argue the most important of those is trust, because what we do is helping people arguably make the most important purchase they're going to make in any given year, or sell their most important asset in any given year. Well, I don't know about you, but when I'm doing that, I want someone to trust me. I want to trust the people who I'm doing that with as well. So trustworthiness is very important. Okay. So there was a whole bunch of precursor to get me to where I want to get here. And that is, I want to talk about rapport. So rapport, ultimately, I want you to look at this and start here, is that when we're right, everything else is different. So I also want to challenge you to give up being right. So one of my favorite sayings is, I can be right or I can be rich. I can be right or I can be happy. I can be right or I can sleep on the couch. Oftentimes, sometimes when I'm right, I still get to sleep on the couch. So my point is, though, is that we don't necessarily want to be different. We want to be the same, and we want people to feel the same, because different equals separate. Different equals just not, people don't like that. And that goes honestly back to cavemen. And I know that seems like an extreme, but there's a part of our brain that literally is telling them, if somebody's different than me, they're bad. There's negative stuff. And take a look at the world today, and I think you can get that. I'm not going to talk about politics, but at the end of the day, I think that we can see that if we consider people to be significantly different, we don't want to associate with them. So consider that. Note the bottom of the screen again. Your number one job should be professional communicator. So what is rapport? I'm going to define it. And this is in NLP terms. Rapport is a specific set of tools and techniques designed to create responsiveness in a group or an individual. Rapport opens up communication. So that front end of it, that sounds all gee whiz, whatever, but I want you to note the end. Rapport opens up communication. People, when I ask them about what rapport is, most people say it's getting people to like me. Oddly enough, that's not actually what happens, but we will get them to trust us by using the rapport techniques I'm going to teach you today. And also, it makes people more responsive, which means that the communication flow between me and the other person increases and it gets better. Let me say it in a way that just very simplistic, and most people look at it, is it's the feeling that we like and trust each other. And I want you to think about this. You have met people in the past where you just walk up to them and it's like they're your best friend and you've known them your entire life. What I want to teach you today is to do that with everybody, so everyone feels that way. And even the people who might be a little bit grumpy or might be in a bad mood or might do, if we use these techniques, it will be super powerful to get us to do that. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to break this down into three specific categories. So we communicate through three modalities: our physiology, in other words, and I'll show you what that is. We also communicate through our physiology, be our body language. We also communicate through the way we say things, and then we communicate with the actual words. So here's the thing that I think is most interesting to me. 55% of communication is nonverbal. 55% of what's happening between me and you, if we're standing in front of each other, if I'm showing you a house, if I'm at a listing appointment, 55% of that is nonverbal. So here's the thing, it's interesting. Most people only focus on one thing when they're talking about communication. They talk about the script, they talk about the words, they talk about how to say this, they talk about how to handle the objection. I'm going to go out on a limb and say none of those things matter if you're not in rapport, because here's the reality. You're still communicating communicating a whole bunch of extra stuff. So I want you to go back to that lemon. If I've got this idea of this lemon in my head that's literally making my mouth water because I'm thinking about the juice squirting up and I'm feeling the skin and the smell, what are you holding inside of your head about your client? What are you holding inside of your head about the experience you're about to have? And I want you to think about this. I've dealt with plenty of clients, as I know most of you have, that I don't like. And I'm just being honest. I would say 90% of my clients I liked and I thought they were good people. And there's another 10% that I didn't care for, or potentially other agents that I didn't care for. That's okay, because not everybody's going to get along. But when I'm meeting with that person, when I'm talking with them, when I'm communicating with them, if I'm holding in my head the fact that I don't like them, guess what? I'm communicating to them whether I want to or not. Remember, your thoughts lead to your feelings. And I don't know about you, but the majority of people I know are not super good at hiding their feelings. They think they are, but they're not super good at it. So the majority of our communication is nonverbal. Now, some of it is actually the tone. So I will talk about this as well. Your voice, pitch, how high or low you speak, tempo, how fast you speak. By the way, when I'm talking to a client, I don't talk this quickly because the majority of people do not talk as quickly as I'm talking right now. Why am I talking so quickly? For two reasons. First of all, like I mentioned, I'm trying to kind of compact some information. And also, if I talked really slow, you guys would probably go to sleep. So I like to have a little bit more energy into it, but I do want to point out when I'm talking to clients, I talk significantly slower. I talk at their speed. And then volume. So these are all things. I want you guys to think about this. There's a lot of people who don't understand how important volume is in communication. So as someone who has had hearing loss, I was in the military and had some hearing loss. I want you to understand that it's very frustrating when somebody talks quietly to me. Why? Because I can't hear them and I have to say what over and over and over again, and it kind of can break rapport. The flip side to that is if I come in hot and loud because I don't hear very well to somebody who does hear very well, one of the things that happens is I can break rapport because they hear really well and they're like, why is this person yelling at me? So things to think about as you're communicating with people. The pitch. Are you at the same pitch? Are you talking faster or slower than them? And are you talking louder or quieter than them? The last thing is the words. So words are actually only 7% of the communication. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really vital. The majority of sales training that I see in our industry and in other industries focuses on the words, which means that they're skipping 93% of communication. People are not focusing on what thoughts they're holding in their head. They're not focusing on their physiology. They're not focusing on how quickly or slowly they talk. They're just reading the script. I remember when I was at a big box company and we had a big training. Those of you who have been through will probably figure out what I'm talking about here pretty soon. But they gave us this script and they had us call FSBOs and expireds, and we were calling the people over and over again. And by the time you were the third or fourth person who got to talk to that person, they were pretty pissed off. As a matter of fact, there was lots of stuff talking about how, it was great to make calls working through that. And I believe that. And here's something else I want to get people to understand. The people who were using this training, who were going through this training, they were reading the script. What they weren't doing is worrying about how they were communicating. So they were reading the exact same script that I had, but I had been trained in being a professional communicator. And I got on there and I used these techniques. I mirrored and matched, which is what I'm going to talk about here in a second, the person on the other end of the phone. And amazingly, they didn't get pissed at me because the words are only 7% of communication. And if you're going to communicate by reading off a script and not worrying about the other things, people are going to think you don't care and they're going to hang up on you. People are going to think you don't care and they're not going to want to work with you. So it's super important to be able to understand how that impacts that as well. Okay. So what do we do? What is this all about? I know that I gave you guys a whole bunch of information in a very short period of time, and I am glad that this is being recorded. And also, I will send the scripts, slides, so you guys can absolutely have my slides. When I mirror and match, what do I need to do? So mirroring and matching, I'm going to go over one is mirroring, one is matching. By the way, it doesn't matter what you do. So what are the things that I can mirror and match? So in other words, if I'm standing in front of you right now, these are the things that I'm actually going to be doing for the first probably couple minutes. Why a couple minutes? Because after you've gotten in rapport for a couple of minutes, you don't have to spend an hour and a half being in rapport with somebody. If you break rapport, start over if something happens. But ultimately, to build rapport, I just simply mirror and match what that other person's doing. So, for example, if someone's putting their hand like this, then I'm just going to do the same thing. Someone who runs their hand through their head like this, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, what I'm not going to do is mimic. So, for example, you guys can see that I'm not Italian, but I do talk with my hands a little bit. You do not want to sit across from me as I'm talking and do this because I'm going to think you're a crazy person. Because also note, when I stop talking, my hands stop moving. So I'm not talking about mimicking. What I'm talking about is looking at posture. So find hands, find breathing is actually a very powerful thing. How do I know when somebody's breathing? Well, guess what? They have to inhale when they stop talking. Just a good way to check that. So these are things that we can mirror and match physically. And I'm telling you, if you don't learn anything else today, just go practice this. Go practice mirroring and matching people physically. Where do I do it? The grocery store, Starbucks, any place you go. Any human being I meet for about 6 months, I literally practice mirroring and matching them. Everything that came up, I did this with my spouse. I did this with my kids. I did this with my teammates. I went and just over and over again started mirroring and matching people. And I cannot tell you the impact that it had. My communication skills went from here to here. All I did was this. There are other things that we can do, and there's other things that I do as an NLP practitioner, as a coach, but I'm telling you, this is the foundation for everything. And if you are willing to do this, if you are willing to learn how to do this, you will become an expert communicator almost overnight. Those of you who ever danced, I like to consider this a dance. So what do? I do what's called pacing and leading. Pacing is me matching and mirroring you. So I might do this to match and mirror you. I might do your breathing. I might do something else with my hands. I can't see the whole body. So, and then after I've done it a couple of times, what I want to do is do something else and see if you come with me. If you come with me, that means that we're in rapport and we're good to go. So, for example, I might do this. Okay, great. Then I might do this. I know you can't see my whole body, so it's kind of awkward. And then I might do this and see if the person comes with me. If they don't, all I'm going to do is mirror and match them again. I promise you do this 2 or 3 times, and they will be following you, and it's a fun thing. So, as you walk away from this webinar today, whenever you're watching this, go ahead and practice this. Have fun. One of my favorite stories is I was traveling for a conference and I was staying at a hotel. Honestly, the conference was 12 to 14-hour days, so I really wasn't doing much in my hotel. But I had learned this recently. And so what I did is I spent about 5 minutes before I checked in. And I know that's longer than I told you guys you need to, literally mirroring and matching the person who checked me in. And I walked up and started going through the checkout process or check-in process. And I said to the young lady behind the desk, I said, "Hey, do you have any upgrades?" She looks at the computer, does some stuff, and says, "Sorry, sir, I don't have any." I'm like, "Okay, no big deal. You can't give me something you don't have." And what was interesting though, so remember, I'd gotten in a high level of rapport with her. I'd mirrored and matched her. And she literally stopped just as she was checking in. She looked up at me and she said, "Let me check something else." Went to her computer. She found me a suite that I could move in. I was there for 5 days, that I could move in tomorrow. And there was no reason to. By the way, she was going to give it to me for free. I wasn't paying extra money. There was no reason for her to give this to me. But I want you to remember, when people know, like, and trust you, when you build rapport with people, people will do things for you. I'll just use an extremely weird example. Imagine if somebody came up to you and said, "Can I have $5?" And you're like, "No, you're weird. I don't know you. You're not my friend. We don't feel like we're in rapport." Versus somebody who you've known for a long time say, "Hey, can I have $5?" Yeah, sure, here you go. What's different? I know, like, and trust the second person. I don't know who the first person is. It's weird. So I want you to translate that. If I can make other people feel like they know, like, and trust me, if I can be in rapport with them, isn't everything else a lot easier? And I really do believe it is. Okay, let's talk about verbal rapport. What can I match verbally? Well, I can match how quickly someone talks. We kind of talked about that before. I want to point out, if you talk faster than the other person, they are going to think you're trying to pull something over on them, that you're trying to get them to do something they don't want. So remember, you want to talk at the same rate that they do. Volume, again, we talked about that, and then tone. So remember, it's your job, and I heard this the very first time I learned this, is in that every new relationship, one person's probably going to be uncomfortable. You volunteer to be that person. Here's what I mean by that. I do talk quickly, generally speaking, but I lived in Arkansas for 20 years, and in the South, people talk slower. No judgment on that. It's just a real thing. So when I dealt with my clients in Arkansas, I slowed down. Why? Because I'm the person who's trying to build rapport. I'm the person who's trying to build trust. So I'm the person who's going to make the change. Really a powerful way to look at that and very helpful. The last thing I'm talking about, the words do matter. I mean, you can't say ridiculous, stupid things and be in rapport because, first of all, it'll break rapport. But second of all, you still have to know some of the scripts. You still have to be able to handle those objections. And one of the things that you can do to further and deeper build rapport is what's called keyword backtracking. So, what does that mean? Basically, it means you use the words and phrases that somebody else does. So, for example, I heard this so many times. These are all things that I've heard, over a 20 plus year career. Hey, I'm just trying to be honest with you. If somebody says to me, I'm just trying to be honest with you, I really appreciate that. I try and be honest with you too. I'm going to be just like them. Okay. Just to let you know. If somebody says that a lot, some people have what we'll call graffiti phrases. If somebody says that a lot, guess what? I'm going to say it back to them. I've heard people say things like amazing or exciting. This house is really amazing. What am I going to say? Yeah, it's a great house. No, I'm going to say, you know what? This house is really amazing. I agree. I'm going to start to use their words because that's how they communicate. That's what they feel comfortable with. Remember, if you want to actually get people to be in rapport, you want to be like them. So these are things, the keyword backtracking is something you can use all throughout a presentation, all throughout a showing, all throughout a conversation, and no one's going to catch it because they expect people to talk that way anyway. All right. I don't have enough time to cover this because we're at the end, but I do want to just kind of finish up with a couple of things. So, first of all, if you want to know how to contact me, then this is how you can get a hold of me. That's my calendar link. I'm happy to do consultations on communication or any other kind of coaching. I'm happy to give people free time. So seriously, if you're interested in anything I've talked about today or learning any more about neuro linguistic programming or communication, feel free to jump on my link there. Also, that is my website, 126coaching.com. Feel free to go there. You can send me a direct message on Facebook, and that is my email address. So I also just want to finish up with things that I actually that actually have worked for me to practice this. So play the rate of speech game. Play the match and mirror game. Do it with everybody you meet. Have fun. Literally go out today, whenever you're going. And I know it's cold all over the country, so some of you may not even be leaving the house. But at some point in time, we're going to go out into public again. So literally practice this. See what happens. I'm going to make a suggestion that you don't practice this for the first time on your client. Again, if you have a significant other, a husband, a wife, a spouse, partner, whatever, practice it with them. See what happens. It's kind of fun. Then I would probably tell them about it so they know. But ultimately, this can be a really fun way to just kind of play with this. And then just practice this for a while and see what happens, and then go start using it on your clients. Remember what I said is that ultimately, at the end of the day, the number one thing that we can do to be better communicators is make the other person feel comfortable. And I'll just kind of leave you with that. I'm sure most of you have met that person who is what we call the natural salesperson. In other words, they're just friends with everybody. Everybody loves them. Everybody likes them. Most of the time that's occurring because they're using these techniques. They just don't even know it. So these techniques were all built based on watching somebody else and modeling somebody else. And that's how they came up with this. So thank you so much. I know I jammed a whole bunch of information into a very short period of time, but I appreciate the opportunity today. Here's what I'd like you to take away from this. Communication, 55% of it is nonverbal. You need to start paying attention to your nonverbal cues that you're giving to people because honestly, sometimes people are literally deleting what they're saying by giving different nonverbal cues. Think about the thoughts you're holding in your head. Think about that lemon. When I go to an appointment, the first thing I think about is how it's going to be successful and how these people are going to like me. And I'll give you one other key. I learned this long before I learned any NLP, but it really does apply. When you're meeting with somebody, if you want to get them to like you, the best way to get them to like you is find something that you like about them and focus on that. And again, you're going to be focusing on that inside your head. And as you're doing that, it's going to be communicated on an unconscious level without you even trying. If you like a person, they'll know it. Now, the flip side to that is if you don't like a person, find that thing that you do like so that you can focus on that positive. So, thanks everybody for allowing me to be here today. This was a fun little class to jam here in 30 minutes. I really appreciate it. I don't think we have any questions. We don't seem to have any questions. I'll offer that up for the next minute or so in case anybody has any questions. And if not, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with me today. And thank you, Follow Up Boss, for doing that.